What evil prank have you pulled off? Two of my friends have never met each other. Before they spoke I told both of them that the other is a bit deaf. They shouted at each other for a few minutes before they realized that I'm an asshole. My mom's laptop wallpaper was a picture of her granddaughter. I copied the picture 100 times and made her wallpaper a slideshow of the same picture over and over again. So the file would change but nothing would change visibly on the monitor. The pictures would change every 10 seconds. On one of the images I painted a tiny little curly mustache on her. So randomly for 10 seconds my niece would have a mustache. My mom thought she was either losing her mind or had a computer virus, and every time the mustache popped up, it was gone by the time she tried to show anyone. One summer in college, I worked in the registrar's office, registering all the incoming freshmen. A professor who was a mentor to me was teaching freshman seminar and asked me to handpick a class for her. Straight A students. High Sats. Whatever. So I did. 15 students. All named Sarah. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. I made fake versions of Internet Explorer that turn your PC off when started in the ICT class at school. Edit. Wow. My first award, thanks. I saw a post about switching around mayo and vanilla pudding. Emptied out a mayo jar and cleaned it well. Filled it with a few pots worth of vanilla pudding and took it to uni. Our uni is very lax about eating during the lectures. So I waited until midday when I was sitting in the middle of all my friends and they were all eating their lunch. Cue me taking out the jar of mayo and a spoon. Popping the lid and taking a big ol' spoonful with a grin. At first only the closest ones noticed. But after the third spoon it was like everyone was frozen around me. Pin drop silence. After the fifth spoon someone faux retched and the spell was broken. The looks of sheer terror and disgust was well worth the pain of eating vanilla pudding. I'm a chocolate kinda gal. When my brother and I were in middle school, my brother liked to skateboard with our next door neighbor. One day, my brother and the neighbor took the sheet of plywood from under my brother's upper bunk bed. No one slept in the upper bunk, out of the house, and started making a skateboard ramp out of it in the neighbor's adjacent yard. My parents had explicitly told him that he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, in my defense, my brother teased me unmercifully, to the point of tears. On multiple occasions. So keep in mind that he had had it coming for a long time. Anyway, an evil little plan hatched in my brain. I ran to the upstairs window and yelled down at them. Brother's name. Guess what? Mom knows everything and she is so mad. Then I slammed the window shut and ran to the stairs and waited while watching my mom read the newspaper. A few moments later, my brother walks in the front door looking worried and says, "Mom, I'm so sorry." My mom, who had no idea what was going on, said, "About what?" while slowly putting the newspaper down. "For making a skateboard ramp out of the wood from the bunk bed." "You did what?" At that moment, a wave of shock and realization swept across my brother's face and our eyes met. I let out the biggest evilest little sister cackle and ran into my room. We are adults now and still laugh about it from time to time. The AM supervisor at my office is a short little man who likes to work from a laptop on a rolling adjustable desk. For over a year I gradually raised the height of this desk and watched as he went from sitting on a stool to an adjustable tall task chair to standing. Last week he removed the wheels from the desk to lower the height. He doesn't realize it's adjustable. A friend kept trying to steal my sushi off my plate at a sushi restaurant. So while she wasn't looking I stuffed it full of wasabi, put a bit of fish back on top to cover my tracks, and pretended to not be looking when she started reaching towards it. She tossed it into her mouth, started chewing down, and I just swung my head towards her to say "You fucked up." 5 minutes of coughing, muffled screaming, and copious amounts of water later, she had learned her lesson. One night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. Took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. I farted under the covers, then pointed at the ceiling above my GF and shouted "Spider." So she'd throw the blankets over her head. Later when she told her parents, that turned out to be the thing that earned her dad's respect for me. Made him laugh so hard he needed an inhaler. Update. She got her revenge. Sitting on the toilet after a grumbly Stanley steamer. I reach for the toilet paper to find one square peeled into two very thin squares. No big deal. There's always a stash under the sink. No. There is not. Every roll has been taken out from under the sink. Okay, there's never not toilet paper under the sink. Coincidence? I'll just send her a text to bring me some paper towels from the kitchen. I refold the two thin squares into one equally useless square and reluctantly used it. Stanley and his grumbly steamer, in all their arrogance, responds to remind me who really gets final say. Back at square one with no squares to spare. There it is written on the empty roll. The future toast I make. Cutting into our wedding cake. Hands can be washed. I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it. So the next day when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams. For those outside the US, on April 1st Street. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends. And when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called. That there had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face. Reactions. Everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair-box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. I got a Harry Potter calligraphy set for my birthday years ago. It had Hogwarts marked paper, envelopes and everything. My brother ate all of my birthday chocolates from an ant that night, so I plotted my revenge. Next September I copied out Harry's letter word for word in green ink, only changing the name. I let him believe he was going to magic school for 2 whole weeks before I crushed it. Once I asked a friend for another friend's phone number. He gave me a teacher's number. I then went on to send multiple messages in a fake angry tone to my unsuspecting teacher. Fuck that diabolical genius of a friend. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy. So naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night. And I knew my coworker was opening the next morning early. So before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening. So when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed. And it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts LMAO. Still proud of that one, honestly. At my sister's swim meet, I found an ice machine tucked away in a garage-looking thing. So I started collecting the ice and somehow managed to put ice in nearly everyone's shoe at the meet. It was a wild, beautiful moment of pure confusion and chaos. Everyone started freaking out and no one knew it was the little shy girl who secretly enjoyed turmoil, smiley face. Working in a hot factory. Supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 * in there while we sweat our ass off in 95 to 110 *F heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive. Walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I am just cooling off and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those fuckers in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it and the planner was pissed swatting around there were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number. Was being a real fucking creep. Anyways, I created an email address. Signed up to Kijiji and placed an ad offering an 83D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. People in school used to always take my Gatorade. So I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie. It was hilarious watching one person to spit salt water in the middle of class only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. I can meow just like a cat. In fact, I can do it so well that people will often look around for the cat that is not there. This has resulted in several hilarious instances of strangers running around frantically looking for the cat and me sitting off to the side watching. Stray cats will usually stare at me for a couple seconds before continuing doing whatever. Pet cats will usually hold a conversation with me. Particularly if they're chatty. Edit. The confusion of everyone's pets fuels the Lady of Cats and she is pleased by your offerings of Reddit awards. I created a fake uniform policy poster for my high school. It wasn't perfect but people were idiots so they fell for it. It took everyone about a week to actually read the poster and see that it was obviously fake. Some people still showed up on the first day wearing the uniform that I designed. Edit. The uniform wasn't anything idiotic looking. Just khaki pants, white button shirt, church shoes, and black socks. The outrage was mostly from the fact that people couldn't wear their name brand clothes as a flex. I got pranked. Does that count? Was at a house party at my then girlfriend's place. She knew me really well and knew that I've got a fairly competitive spirit. The place is really dark. She turns to me in the dim light and says, "My name. I bet you can't fit an orange in your mouth and eat it all in one bite." Wasn't about to say no to a challenge so I took her up on it. Only it wasn't an orange that she'd peeled but a lemon. I used to work for a cruise line. A passenger asked if the crew lives on the ship full time. I and my coworker explained that no. The crew leaves every night to fly back to Miami and then returns each morning. She walked away satisfied. After that cruise was over, our manager was sharing the passenger evaluations with us and was confused about one in particular. It was a woman who had stayed on deck 14 and had complained that she couldn't sleep at night because of the noise of the crew helicopter. Fact 1-to-1. 200 crew do not leave every night but do live on the ship. Fact 2. That ship didn't even have a helipad. Question. WTF was she hearing every night? Picked out every last marshmallow from my sister's box of Lucky Charms. Then took a photo of me eating a bowl of Just Charms. Printed it. And put in the bottom of the bag. I then sealed the bag back up. Hot glued the box and back in the pantry it went. Not me but my cat. That fucker took a huge shit on my pillow next to me while I was asleep. In high school I went into the boys' bathroom and replaced all the soap in the dispensers with pancake syrup. Not a prank I pulled off. But one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16, not legal but that's a whole other mess, for a whole weekend. Saturday went well and I was happy with how I went. Although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house. But the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later I get a phone call from him saying, "Manager, and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mom, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. I convinced a coworker for 2 months that the guy she had sat next to for 3 years was named Jay. Not Dave. They worked in different departments but sat 3 feet away from each other for years. I got the guy in on it. And his manager. Then later his supervisor. Group manager. Division manager. And entire department. They bought him new nameplates for his desk. Changed stuff in the system. So his name would print as Jay. Etc. The only thing they didn't change was his phone number and email. She thought she was going crazy. And when I finally told her, she sucker punched me in the stomach and dropped me to my knees. She was a personal trainer in her off hours. So she got me good. Totally worth it, and I laugh about it to this day over a decade later. My best friend and I were roommates for a few years, and sometimes when I was drunk I liked to draw comics of caricatures of the two of us. They were usually on pizza boxes, and I would leave them outside of his room so it would be one of the first things he saw the next day. Here is an album of most of them with explanations, and another one that needed its own album because of multiple panels. Eventually he and his girlfriend decided to get their own apartment together closer to their jobs. So our time as roommates had come to an end. I decided to leave him one last parting gift on one of our last nights together. He left his wallet out on the coffee table. So I took his ID and taped on little drawings of him where the pictures typically go. A few months later I hear from him about it. Him and his girlfriend were visiting some friends out of state and they were going to this bar. Apparently he handed his ID over to the bouncer like that, and the dude laughed at him because of how ridiculous it was. I was honestly surprised it worked. I totally expected him to notice way before that. But I guess he didn't. In the break room, called my coworker in. I had a chair, plastic cup with an inch of water in it, and a broom in the corner. I asked him to help me stick the cup on the ceiling. Climbed on the chair, and he held the cup up with the broom. Then I said, "Wanna see a cool trick?" Climbed off the chair and walked away with it. You could hear him cussing and yelling out in the parking lot. My freshman year of high school, the big craze at my school was this 50-pack of Crayola markers. IDK, why exactly, but fads are fads. A friend of mine had a pack that she was obsessed with. She had them organized in the pack in like a perfect color gradient order. So of course any time she left the room I'd mix her markers up, so she had to fix them when she came back. This went on for a month maybe? And one day in study hall she leaves, and before she leaves turns to me and she says, "Don't rearrange my fucking markers." So I didn't. I rearranged the caps. You see, these markers were solid white apart from the caps and a little tiny nib at the other end. She got about halfway through fixing them when she noticed she was holding a marker with an orange cap and a turquoise nib. I can't tell you the joy I experienced when she looked at me and said, "You didn't even move the markers, did you?" I laughed so hard I was asked to leave the study hall. She didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. 100% worth it. Gradually over the course of 2 weeks moved my coworkers' monitors closer to the front edge of the desk. Like 1/4 per move. Until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. "Stupid small desk," she grumbled. Near the end, I then moved them back. Just as slowly. Over a few weeks. She never caught on. Early days of networked PCs. DOS and NetWare. I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I and a few other student employees wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log on to the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had 2 coworkers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken the lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance for most of their working hours. They would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these 2 and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look at an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it which noted how long it had been since this prank had last been triggered. ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program which would wait a random time between 5 to 15 minutes and then drop an image of two dudes 69ing on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. Tested it. Put the compiled program in place and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. Edit. Well, this seems to have struck a chord with more than a few. Here's an interesting bit that I did not share initially. This was the late 80s early 90s and decent online porn. Much less gay porn. Didn't really exist. Think ASCII art. So where did I find this image to use? One day I and a few of the other student workers were playing around with a new disk utility that helped visualize where space was being used. An important thing in the days of 20 megabytes hard drives. We had meant to use it to see where some of our network storage had gone, but the utility scanned all the drives on a PC including the networked ones. At the time, as fate would have it, sitting in the CD-ROM drive was a Borland Turbo C installation disk. It popped up in the final report as having a single hidden directory, labeled XXX, of all things, that contained more data than the entirety of the Turbo C installation combined. It was all porn and in high-resolution 640 by 480 VGA glory to boot. A hidden folder containing nothing but pornography had somehow managed to be included on Borland's CD-ROM that had been purchased by thousands of businesses and educational institutions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.